Welcome back, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on the Kitáb-i-Íqán. In this section, dear friends, we will be introducing the Kitáb-i-Íqán, its circumstances of its revelation, as well as the importance of the Kitáb-i-Íqán. Then we will be talking on major themes of the Kitáb-i-Íqán. Okay, dear friends. In the whole range of His Holiness Baha'u'llah's writings, the Kitáb-i-Íqán, the Book of Certitude, has most importance with the exception of the Kitáb-i-Aqdas, which is the most holy book. The Kitáb-i-Íqán was revealed in Baghdad about 2 years before his declaration in honor of Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, the Bab's maternal uncle. The Bab had 3 maternal uncles. The first to embrace his faith was Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, known as Khalid Azam, the greatest uncle. It was he who cared for the Bab and after the passing of his father was responsible for bringing him up. Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali became aware of the spiritual qualities and superhuman powers which his nephew manifested from an early age. He readily recognized the station of the Bab and became an ardent believer as soon as he became acquainted with his claims. Indeed, next to the letters of the living, he was the first person in Shiraz to acknowledge the divine origin of the message of the Bab. From then on, he devoted his life entirely to the promotion of the newly born faith and the protection of its youthful founder. A few months before the martyrdom of the Bab, he was arrested and, upon refusing to recant his faith, was publicly martyred. He is one of the 7 martyrs of Tehran. The eldest uncle, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, although fully aware of the outstanding qualities of his nephew, was not converted to his faith until he met Baha'u'llah in Baghdad and received the Kitáb-i-Íqán in answer to his questions. The third uncle was Haji Mirza Hassan Ali. For some years, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad carried out his business as a merchant away from home, in Bushehr, in association with his brother, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, and his nephew, the Bab. When these two left for Shiraz, he continued to work on his own and was still in Bushehr when the Bab declared his mission to his first disciples. Later, when the Bab made his pilgrimage to Mecca, he traveled by way of Bushehr, where he stayed at the home of Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad. He returned there some months later while journeying back to Shiraz. It was during these visits that Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad witnessed a transformation of spirit in the Bab and wrote about it to his own mother and sister, which is the mother of the Bab, in these words. His Eminence Janab al-Haji has safely arrived and I am pleased to spend my time in his presence. It seems advisable that he should stay in Bushehr for a short while, but please rest assured that soon he will depart for home. Truly, his bountiful soul is the source of felicity for the people of this world and the next. He brings honor to us all. Yet in spite of these remarks and of his unfailing admiration and respect for the Bab, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad did not recognize his station for many years and remained uncommitted to his cause. In the meantime, the martyrdoms of the Bab and his illustrious uncle in 1850 brought immense grief and shock to all the members of the family. The Bab's mother, Fatimeh Begum, could no longer bear to live in her home in Shiraz, and took up residence in far-off Iraq, in the city of Karbala, to be near of Imam Hussein. Until the time Baha'u'llah arrived in Iraq, after his imprisonment in the Siachal, and established contact with her, she remained unaware of the significance of the message of the Bab. It was Baha'u'llah who arranged for Haji Sayyid Javad Karbala'i, one of the distinguished early disciples of the Bab, accompanied by a devoted believer, the wife of a certain Sheikh Abdullah Majid Shirazi, to meet with the mother of the Bab, and demonstrate to her the truth of the mission of her illustrious son. This contact, established by Baha'u'llah, brought forth a wonderful response. Her soul was quickened, and the glory of the new faith of God founded by the Bab was unveiled before her eyes. Later she recognized the station of Baha'u'llah, embraced his faith, and remained steadfast till the end of her life. Although several of the Bab's kinsmen, including his wife, had accepted the faith during the early days of his ministry, and thousands of his followers had laid down their lives in his path, nevertheless Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad was not absolutely convinced that the Bab, his nephew, could be the promised one of Islam. Several believers tried to dispel his doubts, but their efforts did not win him over. Haji Mirza Habibullah and Afnan, who was one of the custodians of the house of Bab in Shiraz, has recorded the following account by his father, Agha Mirza Nuruddin, a follower of the Bab, of a series of discussions which he held with Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad. These discussions appear to have been the turning point in the spiritual life of the Bab's uncle. During the initial stages of our discussions, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad maintained a negative attitude and would repudiate any proof or argument that I put forward. These discussions lasted for several meetings. Once, when I was talking with great fervor and conviction about the faith, he turned to me in astonishment and exclaimed, "Are you really saying that my nephew is the promised Khayyam?" When I reaffirmed my belief that he was, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad became perplexed and expressed his view that this was all very strange. He then began to meditate and was lost in thought. Seeing him in this reflective mood, I could not prevent myself from laughing. He asked my reason for laughing, but as it would reflect badly upon him, I was reluctant to tell. However, he insisted, so I told him, "Your view that your nephew cannot be the promised Khayyam is similar to the objection which Abu Lahab had. He also said, how could it be possible for my nephew to become a prophet? But Muhammad was the true prophet of God. Now it is up to you to investigate this cause. You must be very proud that this sun of truth has dawned from your family and its light shone forth from your home. Do not hold back from it, and be not surprised, for God is able to make of your nephew the promised one of Islam. Be assured that the hands of God are never tied." Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad was moved by these words. He said, "This is an irrefutable answer. Now, what shall I do?" I suggested to him that he might go as a pilgrim to the holy shrines in Iraq, where he could also visit his sister, the mother of the Bab, who had been living there since the martyrdom of her son, then go to Baghdad, attain the presence of Baha'u'llah, ask his questions of him, and put forward his difficulties. I urged him to persevere in his search and rely upon God. I expressed the hope that the veils which now prevented him from seeing the truth might be lifted from his eyes, and that he might attain to the true faith of God. He agreed to my suggestion and said that he felt in his heart that this was the right course to take. Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad thereupon wrote a letter to his youngest brother, Haji Mirza Hassan Ali, who was a merchant in Yazd, acquainted him with his plans to visit the shrines and their sister, and invited him to join him in the journey. Haji Mirza Hassan Ali accepted and asked his brother to wait until he joined him in Shiraz. They both traveled to Iraq via Bushehr. Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, however, did not intimate the real purpose of his journey to his brother until they arrived in Baghdad. There he informed him that his primary object in traveling to Iraq was to investigate the authenticity of the faith and then visit the shrines and the mother of the Bab. He invited his brother to remain in Baghdad for a short period so that they both could attain the presence of Baha'u'llah and afterwards proceed to visit the shrines. On hearing this, Haji Mirza Hassan Ali became angry, and although his junior in age, he spoke harshly to his brother. He warned that under no circumstances would he become a partner in these matters, and that he did not wish to hear about the faith. On that day, he left Baghdad. When this happened, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad decided to accompany his brother to the shrines. It was on his return to Baghdad that he was taken to the house of Baha'u'llah, where he attained his presence alone. This was in the year 1278 AH, which is 1862 AD. His Holiness Baha'u'llah's amanuensis, Mirza Jan, has described the circumstances which led to the revelation of the Kitáb-i-Íqán in a tablet, addressed to Sheikh Abdul Majid Shirazi. He says that one day Haji Sayyid Javad Karbala'i went to Baha'u'llah and informed him that the two uncles of the Bab, having visited the holy shrines in Najaf and Karbala, were now in Baghdad and would be returning home soon. Having ascertained from Haji Sayyid Javad that he had not discussed the faith with them, Baha'u'llah lovingly admonished him for not being engaged in the teaching of the cause. He then instructed him to invite the two brothers to come to his presence. The next day, Haji Sayyid Javad arrived with the uncle of the Bab, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad. The youngest brother did not come. The utterances of Baha'u'llah uplifted and overwhelmed the Bab's uncle as he sat in his presence. At the end, he begged Baha'u'llah to clarify the truth of the Bab's message, bearing in mind that, in his view, some of the traditions of Islam concerning the promised Qayyam were apparently not fulfilled by his nephew. To this Baha'u'llah readily consented. He bade him go home and, after careful consideration, make a list of all the questions which had puzzled him and all the traditions which had bred doubts in his mind, and to bring these to him. The following day, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad arrived with his questions. Within the span of 2 days and 2 nights, the Kitáb-i-Íqán, a lengthy epistle of over 200 pages dealing with all his questions was revealed by His Holiness Baha'u'llah. In the early days, this book was known as Risale Khal, Epistle to the Uncle, but later His Holiness Baha'u'llah designated it as the Kitáb-i-Íqán. Among the papers which are preserved in the family of the Afdan are the questions which Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad presented to Baha'u'llah. They are written on 2 sheets in his own hand and are under 4 headings, all dealing with the coming of the promised Khayyam. The sincerity of the uncle of the Bab in seeking the truth is evident in his questions. Repeatedly he begs His Holiness Baha'u'llah to dispel his doubts so that his heart may be assured and he may acquire absolute faith and certitude in the cause of the Bab. Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad was so affected by meeting Baha'u'llah that he immediately wrote a letter to his son, Haji Mirza Muhammad Taqi, in which he said, "I attain the presence of His Honor Baha, may peace be upon him, and I wish you could have been present. He treated me with the utmost affection and favor, and graciously asked me to stay for the night. It is an absolute truth that deprivation from His bounteous presence is a grievous loss. May God bestow upon me the privilege of attaining His presence perpetually." The Kitáb-i-Íqán dispelled every doubt that Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad had harbored in his mind. As a result of reading this book, he reached the stage of certitude and recognized the station of the Bab. In his will, written some years later, he declared his faith, acknowledged the authenticity of the messages of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and identified himself as a follower of these twin manifestations of God. As to Haji Mirza Sayyid Hassan Ali, the youngest uncle of the Bab, he returned to Yazd without meeting Baha'u'llah. Some years later, however, through the devoted efforts of his wife's brother, he too accepted the faith and remained steadfast throughout his life. Indeed, all the family of the Bab, including his mother, his wife, his uncles and their children, designated as Afnan, embraced the faith. This was actually prophesied by the Bab himself, for he had said that God, through His bounty, would guide all his family to recognize the truth of his cause. The original copy of the Kitáb-i-Íqán, which Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad received, was transcribed by Abdul Baha, who was then 18 years of age. In the margins of a few pages, Baha'u'llah has, in his own hand, made some corrections, and towards the end of the book has written this passage. Amidst them all, we stand life in hand, wholly resigned to His will, that perchance through God's loving kindness and His grace, this revealed and manifest letter may lay down His life as a sacrifice in the path of the primal point, the most exalted word, by Him at whose bidding the Spirit hath spoken. But for this yearning of our soul, we would not for one moment have tarried any longer in this city. Sufficient witness is God unto us. For many years, the original copy of the Kitáb-i-Íqán remained with the family of Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad until in 1948 his great-granddaughter Fatimeh Khanum Afnan presented it to the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith. It reached him a few years later and was placed in the Baha'i International Archives building on Mount Carmel in Haifa. Perhaps it can be said that the Kitáb-i-Íqán was more widely disseminated among the early believers in Persia than any other writing of Baha'u'llah. In those days, the only way of making the holy writings available to their friends was by transcribing them. As new tablets would arrive, the believers were most anxious to make copies for themselves. Copies of several of these tablets were often assembled and bound as a book. There are many such volumes of handwritten compilations of the tablets of the Bab, His Holiness Baha'u'llah, and Abdul Baha in the possession of many Baha'i families who have inherited them from their forebears and to whom they are very precious. There were also some individuals in Persia whose full-time occupation was the transcription of the writings, and the believers used to obtain their copies from them. The Kitáb-i-Íqán was one of the items which kept these men transcribing for many years in order to cope with the demand. From the literary point of view, the Kitáb-i-Íqán can be regarded as an outstanding work in Persian literature. The beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi, who translated this book superbly into English, has described it in these words. Foremost among the priceless treasures cast forth from the billowing ocean of Baha'u'llah's revelation ranks the Kitáb-i-Íqán, a model of Persian prose of a style at once original, chaste, and vigorous, and remarkably lucid, both cogent in argument and matchless in its irresistible eloquence. This book, setting forth in outline the grand redemptive scheme of God, occupies a position unequaled by any work in the entire range of Baha'i literature, except the Kitáb-i-Aqdas, Baha'u'llah's most holy book. Until the Kitáb-i-Íqán was revealed, the significance of the missions of all the prophets of God, the purpose of their revelations, and the true meaning of their words had remained undisclosed. With the revelation of this book, the significance of the words which according to Daniel were closed up and sealed till the time of the end. The seal which Providence for thousands of years had placed upon the holy books of all religions was removed. The Kitáb-i-Íqán is the best example of how to teach the cause of God. Instead of explaining at once the proofs of the authenticity of the message of the Bab, Baha'u'llah first speaks about other prophets, portrays their lives and their sufferings, demonstrates the truth of their missions, and describes the common features of their faiths. In this way, he brings to the understanding of the reader the truth of his own religion and enables him to recognize the reality of his own prophet. Having built this strong foundation, he then, towards the end of the book, speaks of the Bab and his message, and applies to this new revelation the standards he has applied in verifying the truth of other prophets. Since all the manifestations of God derive their authority from the same source, it is therefore possible to know the latest manifestation if one knows the qualities and attributes of one who appeared in a former age. The great majority of the followers of the world's religions, however, are taught to believe only in one messenger of God. While sincere in their belief that their religion is true and divine in origin, they often have not recognized the reality of their own prophet. There is a great deal of difference between having knowledge of a religion and knowing the reality of the founder of one's faith. For example, a man may possess a piece of gold and may know that it is precious, yet be unable to distinguish gold from brass. Such a man will fail to recognize a new piece of gold when he sees it. Such is mankind's condition today. But should anyone recognize the reality of the founder of his own religion, he will have no difficulty in accepting Baha'u'llah as the manifestation of God for this age. The Kitáb-i-Íqán has enabled a vast number of people from various backgrounds to understand the truth of their own religions. The first step towards believing in Baha'u'llah. This book has shed great luster upon the holy books of past dispensations. It has unfolded the pattern and disclosed the meaning of progressive revelation. It has laid down an enduring foundation for the ultimate unity of all past religions. It has served as a key with which the followers of Baha'u'llah have opened doors of knowledge hitherto unknown to man. It has become a fountainhead of inspiration for Baha'i scholars and teachers who have since written volumes proving the authenticity of the message of His Holiness Baha'u'llah by rational and intellectual proofs or by interpretation of past holy scriptures. Indeed, this book has given a new vision to the Baha'is, enabling them to unravel the mysteries of religion and teach their faith with greater insight and knowledge. The first thing to bear in mind when studying the Kitáb-i-Íqán is the fact that His Holiness Baha'u'llah wrote this book for a man whose background was a Muslim. The passages he quoted are often from the Qur'an or the traditions of Islam. In the opening paragraphs, His Holiness Baha'u'llah has made the recognition of truth conditional upon man's detachment from this world, a point which he stresses throughout the book. These are his words: "No man shall attain the shores of the ocean of true understanding, except he be detached from all that is in heaven and on earth." The essence of these words is this: they that tread the path of faith, they that thirst for the wine of certitude, must cleanse themselves of all that is earthly, their ears from idle talk, their minds from vain imaginings, their hearts from worldly affections, their eyes from that which perisheth. They should put their trust in God, and holding fast unto Him, follow in His way. Then will they be made worthy of the effulgent glories of the Sun of divine knowledge and understanding, and become the recipients of a grace that is infinite and unseen. In the first section of the Kitáb-i-Íqán, His Holiness Baha'u'llah dwells on the history of the prophets of the past and explains the main reason for man's opposition to them. By understanding these reasons, one can be guided to recognize the truth of the cause of God in this day. He attaches such importance to this theme that he devotes a considerable portion of the book to it. After describing some of the cruelties and indignities which were heaped upon certain prophets of old, His Holiness Baha'u'llah remarks, "And now ponder upon these things. What could have caused such contention and conflict? Why is it that the advent of every true manifestation of God hath been accompanied by such strife and tumult, by such tyranny and upheaval? This notwithstanding the fact that all the prophets of God, whenever made manifest unto the peoples of the world, have invariably foretold the coming of yet another prophet after them, and have established such signs as would herald the advent of the future dispensation. To this the records of all sacred books bear witness. Why then is it that despite the expectation of men in their quest of the manifestations of holiness, and in spite of the signs recorded in the sacred books, should such acts of violence, of oppression and cruelty have been perpetrated in every age and cycle against all the prophets and chosen ones of God? His Holiness Baha'u'llah then enumerates several causes for man's rejection of the manifestations of God. First among these is the fact that the masses in every age have blindly followed their clergy, who have, for the most part, opposed the new prophet of God. Concerning the religious leaders, His Holiness Baha'u'llah writes, "Leaders of religion in every age have hindered their people from attaining the shores of eternal salvation. Inasmuch as they held the reins of authority in their mighty grasp, some for the lust of leadership, others through want of knowledge and understanding, have been the cause of the deprivation of the people. By their sanction and authority, every prophet of God hath drunk from the chalice of sacrifice, and winged his flight unto the heights of glory. What unspeakable cruelties they that have occupied the seats of authority and learning have inflicted upon the true monarchs of the world, those gems of divine virtue, content with a transitory dominion, they have deprived themselves of an everlasting sovereignty." Later in the book, His Holiness Baha'u'llah condemns the divines for their ignorance and lack of insight. Among these are the divines and doctors living in the days of the manifestation of God, who, because of their want of discernment and their love and eagerness for leadership, have failed to submit to the cause of God, nay, even refused to incline their ears unto the divine melody. They have thrust their fingers into their ears, and the people also, utterly ignoring God and taking them for their masters, have placed themselves unreservedly under the authority of these pompous and hypocritical leaders, for they have no sight, no hearing, no heart of their own to distinguish truth from falsehood. Another cause of man's refusal to accept the new messenger is that he brings new teachings, abrogates the laws of the past, and establishes a new order. This radical change upsets religious leaders, for they see the new message as a challenge to their authority and arise to oppose him with all their power. Another reason for rejecting the new prophet is that in every religion certain signs are given for the advent of the next manifestation of God. Because man has expected a literal fulfillment of these signs and has failed to understand their true meaning, he has been unable to recognize the new message from God. To elucidate this point, His Holiness Baha'u'llah devotes no less than 70 pages to the interpretation of one passage from the Gospels, which gives the signs of the return of His Holiness Christ. In doing so, he also touches upon several other subjects. Concerning the signs of the coming of Christ, he reveals Afterwards, the companions and disciples of Jesus asked him concerning those signs that must needs signalize the return of his manifestation. When, they asked, shall these things be? Several times they questioned that peerless beauty, and every time he made reply, he set forth a special sign that should herald the advent of the promised dispensation. To this testify the records of the four Gospels. This wronged one will cite but one of these instances, thus conferring upon mankind, for the sake of God, such bounties as are yet concealed within the treasury of the hidden and sacred tree, that haply mortal men may not remain deprived of their share of the immortal fruit, and attain to a dewdrop of the waters of everlasting life, which from Baghdad, the abode of peace, are being vouchsafed unto all mankind. These are the melodies sung by Jesus, Son of Mary, in accents of majestic power, in the Rezvan of the Gospel, revealing those signs that must needs herald the advent of the manifestation after him. In the first Gospel according to Matthew, it is recorded, and when they asked Jesus concerning the signs of his coming, he said unto them, immediately after the oppression of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the earth shall be shaken, and then shall appear the Son, the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angel with a great sound of a trumpet. Inasmuch as the Christian divines have failed to apprehend the meaning of these words, and did not recognize their object and purpose, and have clung to the literal interpretation of the words of Jesus, they therefore became deprived of the streaming grace of the Mohammedan revelation and its showering bounties. His Holiness Baha'u'llah then explains at some length the meaning of these words. By oppression is meant the want of capacity to acquire spiritual knowledge and apprehend the Word of God. By it is meant that when the day star of truth have set, and the mirrors that reflect his light have departed, mankind will become afflicted with oppression and hardship, knowing not whether to turn for guidance. Such a condition as this is witnessed in this day, when the reins of every community have fallen into the grasp of foolish leaders who lead after their own whims and desire. On their tongue the mention of God hath become an empty name. In their midst his holy word a dead letter, though they recognize in their hearts the law of God to be one and the same, yet from every direction they issue a new command, and in every season proclaim a fresh decree. No two are found to agree on one and the same law, for they seek no God but their own desire, and tread no path but the path of error. With all their power and strength, they strive to secure themselves in their petty pursuits, fearful lest the least discredit undermine their authority or blemish the display of their magnificence. Were the eye to be anointed and illumined with the collyrium of the knowledge of God, it would surely discover that a number of voracious beasts have gathered and preyed upon the carrion of the souls of men. What oppression is greater than that which hath been recounted? What oppression is more grievous than a soul seeking the truth and wishing to attain unto the knowledge of God, should know not where to go for it, and from whom to seek it. For opinions have sorely differed, and the ways unto the attainment of God have multiplied. This oppression is the essential feature of every revelation. Unless it cometh to pass, the Sun of Truth will not be made manifest, for the break of the morn of divine guidance must needs follow the darkness of the night of error. Concerning the words sun and moon, His Holiness Baha'u'llah states, the terms sun and moon mentioned in the writings of the prophets of God is not meant solely the sun and moon of the visible universe. Nay, rather manifold are the meanings they have intended for these terms. In every instance they have attached to them a particular significance. Thus, by the sun, in one sense, is meant those sons of truth who rise from the dayspring of ancient glory and fill the world with a liberal effusion of grace from on high. These sons of truth are the universal manifestations of God in the worlds, of his attributes and names, even as the visible sun that assisteth as decreed by God, the true one, the adored, in the development of all earthly things, such as the trees, the fruits, and colors thereof, the minerals of the earth, and all that may be witnessed in the world of creation. So do the divine luminaries, by their loving care and educative influence, cause the trees of divine unity, the fruits of his oneness, the leaves of detachment, the blossoms of knowledge and certitude, and the myrtles of wisdom and utterance, to exist and be made manifest. It is the warmth that these luminaries of God generate, and the undying fires they kindle, which cause the light of the love of God to burn fiercely in the heart of humanity. In another sense, by these terms is intended the divines of the former dispensation, who live in the days of the subsequent revelations, and who hold the reins of religion in their grasp. If these divines be illumined by the light of the latter revelation, they will be acceptable unto God, and will shine with a light everlasting. Otherwise, they will be declared as darkened, even though to outward seeming they be leaders of men, inasmuch as belief and unbelief, guidance and error, felicity and misery, light and darkness are all dependent upon the sanction of him who is the day star of truth. Whosoever among the divines of every age receiveth in the day of reckoning the testimony of faith from the source of true knowledge, he verily becometh the recipient of learning, of divine favor, and of the light of true understanding. Otherwise he is branded as guilty of folly, denial, blasphemy, and oppression. It is evident and manifest unto every discerning observer, that even as the light of the star fadeth before the effulgent splendor of the sun, so doth the luminary of earthly knowledge, of wisdom and understanding, vanish into nothingness when brought face to face with the resplendent glories of the Sun of Truth, the day star of divine enlightenment. In another sense, the terms sun, moon, and stars are meant such laws and teachings as have been established and proclaimed in every dispensation, such as the laws of prayer and fasting. Hence it is clear and manifest that by the words the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, is intended the waywardness of the divines, and annulment of laws firmly established by divine revelation, all of which in symbolic language have been foreshadowed by the manifestation of God. It is unquestionable that in every succeeding revelation, the sun and moon of the teachings, laws, commandments, and prohibitions which have been established in the preceding dispensation and which have overshadowed the people of that age become darkened, that is, are exhausted and cease to exert their influence. Concerning the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, His Holiness Baha'u'llah affirms that this sign is manifest both in the visible and invisible heavens. Before the coming of each prophet, not only has a star appeared in the skies, indicating the birth of a new revelation, but a herald has also announced these glad tidings to the people of that age. For example, the soothsayers in the time of his Moses warned Pharaoh, "A star hath risen in the heaven, and lo, it foreshadoweth the conception of a child who holdeth your fate and the fate of your people in his hand." In like manner, there appeared a sage who in the darkness of the night brought tidings of joy unto the people of Israel, imparting consolation to their souls and assurance to their hearts. Before the days of the revelation of Christ, a few of the Magi went to Herod and said, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him." This was the sign appearing in the visible heaven. However, it was John the Baptist who was the spiritual star. He foretold the coming of Christ and prepared people for his revelation. Before the advent of Muhammad also, similar events took place. The following are the words of His Holiness Baha'u'llah concerning those who heralded the Prophet of Islam. As to the signs of the invisible heaven, there appeared 4 men who successively announced unto the people the joyful tidings of the rise of that divine luminary. Rusbeh, later named Salman, was honored by being in their service. As the end of one of these approached, he would send Rusbeh unto the other until the fourth who, feeling his death to be nigh, addressed Rusbeh, saying, "O Rusbeh, when thou hast taken up my body and buried it, go to Hijaz, for there the day star of Muhammad will arise. Happy art thou, for thou shalt behold his face. His face." And in this revelation, before the declaration of the Bab, this twofold sign appeared. His Holiness Baha'u'llah states, "Know thou verily that many an astronomer hath announced the appearance of its star in the visible heaven. Likewise there appeared on earth Ahmad and Kazem, those twin resplendent lights." This is a reference to Sheikh Ahmad Asai. He was the founder of the Sheikhi school of Islam, and he was followed by Sayyid Kazim Arashdi, and both of them taught their followers that the coming of the promised one of Islam was at hand and prepared them for his advent. And most of the early Babis were from the Sheikhi sect. Concerning the mourning of the tribes of the earth, and the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds of heaven, His Holiness Baha'u'llah writes, These words signify that in those days men will lament the loss of the sun, of the divine bounty, of the moon of knowledge, and of the stars of divine wisdom. Thereupon they will behold the countenance of the Promised One, the adored beauty descending from heaven and riding upon the clouds. By this is meant that the divine beauty will be made manifest from the heaven of the will of God and will appear in the form of the human temple. The term heaven denoteth loftiness and exaltation, inasmuch as it is the seat of the revelation of those manifestations of holiness, the daysprings of ancient glory. These ancient beings, though delivered from the womb of their mother, have in reality descended from the heaven of the will of God. Though they be dwelling on this earth, yet their true habitations are the retreats of glory in the realms above. Whilst walking amongst mortals, they soar in the heaven of the divine presence. Without feet, they tread the path of the Spirit, and without wings, they rise unto the exalted heights of divine unity. With every fleeting breath, they cover the immensity of space, and at every moment traverse the kingdoms of the visible and the invisible. And as to the meaning of the clouds, His Holiness Baha'u'llah asserts, these clouds signify in one sense the annulment of laws, the abrogation of former dispensations, the repeal of rituals and customs current amongst men, the exalting of the illiterate faithful above the learned oppressors of the faith. In another sense, they mean the appearance of that immortal beauty in the image of mortal man, with such human limitations as eating and drinking, poverty and riches, glory and abasement, sleeping and waking, and such other things as cast doubt in the minds of men and cause them to turn away. All such avails are symbolically referred to as clouds. Regarding the sending of angels, His Holiness Baha'u'llah explains that these are holy souls who have sanctified themselves from every human limitation and have become endowed with the attributes of the spiritual and have been adorned with the noble traits of the blessed, and they therefore have been designated as angels. In the course of interpreting the aforementioned passage from the Gospel, His Holiness Baha'u'llah elucidates several other points and throws light on some obscure and hidden words of the prophets, quotes extensively from the Qur'an and traditions of Islam, and reveals a vast range of new verities which had remained unknown and concealed within all former religions. His Holiness Baha'u'llah explains the meaning of such terms as the changing of the earth, the cleaving of heaven expected by Islam to happen at the last hour, the day of resurrection, and the day when the heaven shall give out a palpable smoke which shall enshroud mankind. His Holiness Baha'u'llah further asserts, were the signs of the manifestation of God in every age to appear in the visible realm in accordance with the text of established traditions, none could possibly deny or turn away, nor would the blessed be distinguished from the miserable, and the transgressor from the God-fearing. Judge fairly. Were the prophecies recorded in the Gospel to be literally fulfilled, Were Jesus, son of Mary, accompanied by angels to descend from the visible heaven upon the clouds, who would dare to disbelieve? Who would dare to reject the truth and wax disdainful? Nay, such consternation would immediately seize all the dwellers of the earth, that no soul would feel able to utter a word, much less to reject or accept the truth. The reason that people have not understood the meaning of the signs given in the holy books is that they have blindly followed their religious leaders. His Holiness Baha'u'llah confirms this in the Kitáb-i-Íqán in these words: such objections and differences have persisted in every age and century. The people have always busied themselves with such specious discourses, vainly protesting, "Wherefore hath now this or that sign appeared?" Such ills befell them only because they have clung to the ways of the divines of this age in which they lived, and blindly imitated them in accepting or denying these essences of detachment, these holy and divine beings. These leaders, owing to their immersion in selfish desires and their pursuit of transitory and sordid things, have regarded these divine luminaries as being opposed to the standards of their knowledge and understanding, and the opponents of their ways and judgments, as they have literally interpreted the Word of God and the sayings and traditions of the letters of unity, and expounded them according to their own deficient understanding. They have therefore deprived themselves and all their people of the bountiful showers of the grace and mercies of God. To understand the mysteries enshrined in God's religion, His Holiness Baha'u'llah repeatedly states, "Man must cleanse his heart from all earthly things." Dear friends, here is one passage. "Wert thou to cleanse the mirror of thy heart from the dust of malice, thou wouldst apprehend the meaning of the symbolic terms revealed by the all embracing Word of God, made manifest in every dispensation, and wouldst discover the mysteries of divine knowledge. Not, however, until thou consumest with the flame of utter detachment those veils of idle learning that are current amongst men, canst thou behold the resplendent morn of true knowledge. Know verily that knowledge is of two kinds, divine and satanic. The one welleth out from the fountain of divine inspiration, the other is but a reflection of vain and obscure thoughts. The source of the former is God Himself, the motive force of the latter, the whisperings of selfish desire. The one is guided by the principle, "Fear ye God, God will teach you." The other is but a confirmation of the truth, "Knowledge is the most grievous veil between man and his Creator." The former bringeth forth the fruit of patience, of longing desire, of true understanding and love, whilst the latter can yield naught but arrogance, vain glory, and conceit. From the sayings of those masters of holy utterance, who have expounded the true meaning of knowledge, the odor of these dark teachings which have obscured the world can in no wise be detected. The tree of such teachings can yield no result except iniquity and rebellion, and beareth no fruit but hatred and envy. Its fruit is a deadly poison, its shadow a consuming fire. Another important factor which has hindered recognition of the manifestations of God is the tests which are associated with their revelations. In each case, certain events in the life of the manifestation have acted as stumbling blocks to people, preventing them from recognizing the truth. Concerning this, His Holiness Baha'u'llah has revealed these words. Know verily, purpose underlying all these symbolic terms and abstruse allusions which emanate from the revealers of God's holy cause hath been to test and prove the peoples of the world, that thereby the earth of the pure and illuminated hearts may be known from the perishable and barren soil. From time immemorial, such hath been the way of God amidst his creatures, and to this testify the records of the sacred books. He demonstrates this important principle by giving a few examples. Speaking of Muhammad, he used to face Jerusalem while leading his followers in prayer. His Holiness Baha'u'llah recounts the story of his sudden turning towards the holy mosque, Mecca. When the Prophet, together with his companions, was offering the noontide prayer, the voice of Gabriel was heard. Turn thou thy face towards the sacred mosque. In the midst of that same prayer, Muhammad suddenly turned his face away from Jerusalem and faced the Kaaba, whereupon a profound dismay seized suddenly the companions of the Prophet. Their faith was shaken severely. So great was their alarm that many of them, discontinuing their prayer, apostatized their faith. Verily, God caused not this turmoil, but to test and prove his servants. Yea, such things as throw consternation into the hearts of all men come to pass only that each soul may be tested by the touchstone of God, that the true may be known and distinguished from the false. Yet another story mentioned by His Holiness Baha'u'llah in illustration of this theme concerns Moses. For instance, consider Moses. Whilst passing one day, ere his ministry was proclaimed, he saw two men engaged in fighting. One of them asked the help of Moses against his opponent, whereupon Moses intervened and slew him. And now ponder in thy heart the commotion which God stirreth up. Reflect upon the strange and manifold trials with which he doth test his servants. Consider how he hath suddenly chosen from among his servants and entrusted with the exalted mission of divine guidance him who was known as guilty of homicide, who himself had acknowledged his cruelty, and who for well nigh 30 years had in the eyes of the world been reared in the home of Pharaoh and been nourished at his table. Was not God the omnipotent King able to withhold the hand of Moses from murder, so that manslaughter should not be attributed unto him, causing bewilderment and aversion among the people? Mankind was similarly tested when Christ appeared, but on that occasion the circumstances of his birth were the test, as His Holiness Baha'u'llah explains. Likewise, reflect upon the state and condition of Mary. So deep was the perplexity of that most beauteous countenance, so grievous her case, that she bitterly regretted she had ever been born. Reflect what answer could Mary have given to the people around her? How could she claim that a babe whose father was unknown had been conceived of the Holy Ghost? Therefore did Mary, that veiled and immortal countenance, take up her child and return unto her home. And now meditate upon this most great convulsion, this grievous test. Notwithstanding all these things, God conferred upon that essence of the Spirit who was known amongst the people as fatherless the glory of prophethood, and made him his testimony unto all that are in heaven and on earth. Having clearly demonstrated some of the causes which have prevented men from recognizing the messengers of God, His Holiness Baha'u'llah begins the second part of the Kitáb-i-Íqán with one of the most illuminating passages revealed by him concerning the nature of the manifestation and his relationship to God and man. In the following words, His Holiness Baha'u'llah states most eloquently that man shall never of himself be able to know his Creator, but by His bounty God reveals Himself through a prophet in each age. To every discerning and illumined heart, it is evident that God, the unknowable essence, the divine being, is immensely exalted beyond every human attribute, such as corporeal existence, ascent and descent, egress and regress. Far be it from His glory that human tongue should adequately recount His praise, or that human heart comprehend His fathomless mystery. He is and hath ever been veiled in the ancient eternity of His essence, and will remain in His reality everlastingly hidden from the sight of men. He standeth exalted beyond and above all separation and union, all proximity and remoteness. No sign can indicate His presence or His absence, inasmuch as by a word of His command all that are in heaven and on earth have come to exist, and by His wish, which is the primal will itself, all have stepped out of utter nothingness into the realm of being, the world of the visible. All the prophets of God and their chosen ones, all the divines, the sages, and the wise of every generation unanimously recognize their inability to attain unto the comprehension of that quintessence of all truth, and confess their incapacity to grasp Him, who is the inmost reality of all things. The station and nature of the manifestation of God are exalted above the world of humanity. He is in truth the embodiment of God's attributes revealed to man. He is the source of all the spiritual energies which are released from age to age. Just as the sun is the source of life and energy to this earth, so the manifestation of God is the sun to mankind. The life, growth, and progress of humanity are due to and depend upon the appearance of these heavenly souls. His Holiness Baha'u'llah extols the station of the manifestations of God and reveals a measure of their glory in these words: The door of the knowledge of the Ancient of Days being thus closed in the face of all beings, the source of infinite grace, according to His saying, His grace hath transcended all things, My grace hath encompassed them all, hath caused those luminous gems of holiness to appear out of the realm of the Spirit in the noble form of the human temple, and be made manifest unto all men, that they may impart unto the world the mysteries of the unchangeable being, and tell of the subtleties of his imperishable essence. These sanctified mirrors, these daysprings of ancient glory, are one and all the exponents on earth of him who is the central orb of the universe, its essence and ultimate purpose. From him proceed their knowledge and power. From him is derived their sovereignty. The beauty of their countenance is but a reflection of his image, and their revelation a sign of his deathless glory. They are the treasuries of divine knowledge and the repositories of celestial wisdom. Through them is transmitted a grace that is infinite, and by them is revealed the light that can never fade. Even as he hath said, there is no distinction whatsoever between thee and them, except that they are thy servants, and are created of thee. This is the significance of the tradition, I am he, himself, and he is I, myself. And again, His Holiness Baha'u'llah reveals the following. And of all men, the most accomplished, the most distinguished, and the most excellent are the manifestations of the Son of Truth. Nay, all else besides these manifestations live by the operation of their will, and move and have their being through the outpourings of their grace. But for thee I would have not created the heavens. Nay, all in their holy presence fade into utter nothingness, and are a thing forgotten. Human tongue can never befittingly sing their praise, and human speech can never unfold their mystery. These tabernacles of holiness, these primal mirrors which reflect the light of unfading glory, are but expressions of him who is the invisible of the invisibles. By the revelation of these gems of divine virtue, all the names and attributes of God, such as knowledge and power, sovereignty and dominion, mercy and wisdom, glory, bounty, and grace, are made manifest. These are two passages in the Qur'an which appear to be contradictory. One speaks of the unity of the messengers of God, the other exalts some above others. His Holiness Baha'u'llah quotes these and explains the oneness of the manifestations of God on the one hand, and their difference on the other. Of their unity, he states, furthermore, it is evident to thee that the bearers of the trust of God are made manifest unto the peoples of the earth as the exponents of a new cause and the bearers of a new message, inasmuch as these birds of the celestial throne are all sent down from the heaven of the will of God, and as they all arise to proclaim his irresistible faith, they therefore are regarded as one soul and the same person. These manifestations of God have each a twofold station. One is the station of pure abstraction and essential unity, and in this respect, if thou callest them all by one name, and dost ascribe to them the same attribute, thou hast not erred from the truth, even as he hath revealed no distinction do we make between any of his messengers. For they one and all summoned the people of the earth to acknowledge the unity of God, and herald unto them the Cathar of an infinite grace and bounty. They are all invested with the robe of prophethood and honored with the mantle of glory. It is clear and evident to thee that all the prophets are the temples of the cause of God, who have appeared clothed in diverse attire. If thou wilt observe with discriminating eyes, thou wilt behold them all abiding in the same tabernacle, soaring in the same heaven, seated upon the same throne, uttering the same speech, and proclaiming the same faith. Such is the unity of those essences of being, those luminaries of infinite and immeasurable splendor. Wherefore should one of these manifestations of holiness proclaim, saying, I am the return of all the prophets, he verily speaketh the truth. In like manner, in every subsequent revelation, the return of the former revelation is a fact, the truth of which is firmly established. Then, speaking of the differences which distinguish the manifestations of God, His Holiness Baha'u'llah explains. In this respect, each manifestation of God hath its distinct individuality, a definitely prescribed mission, a predestined revelation, and specially designated limitations. Each one of them is known by a different name, is characterized by a special attribute, fulfills a definite mission, and is entrusted with a particular revelation. Even as he saith, some of the apostles we have caused to excel the others. To some God hath spoken, some he hath raised and exalted, and to Jesus, son of Mary, we gave manifest signs, and we strengthened him with the Holy Spirit. It is because of this difference in their station and mission that the words and utterances flowing from these well springs of divine knowledge appear to diverge and differ. Otherwise, in the eyes of them that are initiated into the mysteries of divine wisdom, all their utterances are in reality but the expressions of one truth. Just as the reality of each manifestation of God is the same as that of former manifestations, so their followers are likewise the return of the essence of the followers of former dispensations. In this connection, His Holiness Baha'u'llah uses the following analogy. Consider the rose, whether it blossometh in the east or in the west, it is none the less a rose. For what mattereth in this respect is not the outward shape and form of the rose, but rather the smell and fragrance which it doth impart. As already indicated, the manifestation of God has a dual nature, divine and human. His Holiness Baha'u'llah's explanation is illuminating. Thus, viewed from the standpoint of their oneness and sublime detachment, the attributes of Godhead, divinity, supreme singleness, and inmost essence have been and are applicable to those essences of being, inasmuch as they all abide on the throne of divine revelation and are established upon the seat of divine concealment. Through their appearance, the revelation of God is made manifest, and by their countenance, the beauty of God is revealed. Thus it is that the accents of God Himself have been heard, uttered by these manifestations of the divine being. Viewed in the light of their second station, the station of distinction, differentiation, temporal limitations, characteristics, and standards, they manifest absolute servitude, utter destitution, and complete self effacement. Even as he saith, I am the servant of God. I am but a man like you. Were any of the all embracing manifestations of God to declare, I am God, he verily speaketh the truth, and no doubt attacheth thereto. For it hath been repeatedly demonstrated that through their revelation, their attributes and names, the revelation of God, his name, and his attributes are made manifest in the world. And were they to say, We are the servants of God, this also is a manifest and indisputable fact, for they have been manifest in the uttermost state of servitude, a servitude the like of which no man can possibly attain. One of the questions which Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad asked His Holiness Baha'u'llah to resolve for him concerned the circumstances of the appearance of the Ghayyam. According to the traditions of Islam, he used to come with great sovereignty and rule over the people. These conditions were not literally fulfilled by the Bab. His Holiness Baha'u'llah devotes a considerable part of the Kitáb-i-Íqán to his reply demonstrating that all the prophets of God have appeared with majesty and power, but that these were spiritual conditions rather than physical. Their sovereignty was heavenly, and that through it they established their ascendancy and lordship over mankind. Speaking of the sovereignty of the Ghayyam, he writes, This sovereignty, however, is not the sovereignty which the minds of men have falsely imagined. Moreover, the prophets of old, each and every one, whenever announcing to the people of their day the advent of the coming revelation, have invariably and specifically referred to that sovereignty with which the promised manifestation must needs be invested. This is attested by the records of the scriptures of the past. This sovereignty hath not been solely and exclusively attributed to the Ghayyam. Nay, rather, the attribute of sovereignty and all other names and attributes of God have been and will ever be vouchsafed unto all the manifestations of God, before and after him, inasmuch as these manifestations, as it hath already been explained, are the embodiments of the attributes of God, the invisible and the revealers of the divine mysteries. Furthermore, by sovereignty is meant the all encompassing, all pervading power which is inherently exercised by the Ghayyam, whether or not he appear to the world clothed in the majesty of earthly dominion. This is solely dependent upon the will and pleasure of the Ghayyam himself. You will readily recognize that the terms sovereignty, wealth, life, death, judgment, and resurrection spoken of by the scriptures of old are not what this generation hath conceived and vainly imagined. Nay, by sovereignty is meant that sovereignty which in every dispensation resideth within and is exercised by the person of the manifestation, the day star of truth. That sovereignty is the spiritual ascendancy which he exerciseth to the fullest degree over all that is in heaven and on earth, and which in due time revealeth itself to the world in direct proportion to its capacity and spiritual receptiveness. Comparing the ascendancy and creative power of the manifestations of God with the fleeting sovereignty of earthly kings, His Holiness Baha'u'llah states, Be fair is this sovereignty which, through the utterance of one word, hath manifested such pervading influence, ascendancy, and awful majesty. Is this sovereignty superior, or is this worldly dominion of these kings of the earth, who, despite their solicitude for their subjects and their help of the poor, are assured only of an outward and fleeting allegiance, while in the hearts of men they inspire neither affection nor respect? Hath not that sovereignty, through the potency of one word, subdued, quickened, and revitalized the whole world? What can the lowly dust compare with him who is the Lord of lords? What tongue dare utter the immensity of difference that lieth between them? Nay, all comparison falleth short in attaining the hallowed sanctuary of his sovereignty. Were man to reflect, he would surely perceive that even the servant of his threshold ruleth over all created things. This hath already been witnessed and will in future be made manifest. Among other stories which His Holiness Baha'u'llah recounts to demonstrate the meaning, sovereignty, and dominion attributed to the prophets of God is that of Jesus during his captivity in the hands of the Jews. Similarly, call thou to mind the day when the Jews who had surrounded Jesus, son of Mary, were pressing him to confess his claim of being the Messiah and prophet of God, so that they might declare him an infidel and sentence him to death. Then they led him away, he who was the daystar of the heaven of divine revelation, unto Pilate and Caiaphas, who was the leading divine of that age. The chief priests were all assembled in the palace, also a multitude of people who had gathered to witness his sufferings, to deride and injure him. Though they repeatedly questioned him, hoping that he would confess his claim, yet Jesus held his peace and spake not. Finally, an accursed of God arose, and approaching Jesus, adjured him, saying, Didst thou not claim to be the divine Messiah? Didst thou not say, I am the King of kings? My word is the word of God, and I am the breaker of the Sabbath day? Thereupon Jesus lifted up his head and said, Beholdest thou not the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and might? These were his words, and yet considered how to outward seeming he was devoid of all power, except that inner power which was of God, and which had encompassed all that is in heaven and on earth. In the course of his exposition of sovereignty, His Holiness Baha'u'llah dwells on the sufferings which were heaped upon the prophets of God and his chosen ones. He describes the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, which shed a glorious luster upon the faith of Islam. He also portrays the sufferings and tribulations which were inflicted upon Muhammad during the early years of his ministry. In this connection, His Holiness Baha'u'llah demonstrates that the word spoken by the manifestation transports the human soul from a state of wretchedness and ignorance into the glorious realm of divine virtues and perfections. Through the potency of his revelation, he welds the hearts of contending peoples and kindreds and makes of them a single nation. And he shows the relevance of a well-known biblical prophecy. Furthermore, how numerous are those peoples of diverse beliefs, of conflicting creeds and opposing temperaments, who through the reviving fragrance of the divine springtime, breathing from the Rizwan of God, have been arrayed with the new robe of divine unity and have drunk from the cup of his singleness. This is the significance of the well-known words, "The wolf and the lamb shall feed together." Behold the ignorance and folly of those who, like the nations of old, are still expecting to witness the time when these beasts will feed together in one pasture. Such is their low estate. Methinks never have their lips touched the cup of understanding, neither have their feet trodden the path of justice. Besides, of what profit would it be to the world were such a thing to take place? How well hath he spoken concerning them? Hearts have they, with which they understand not, and eyes have they, with which they see not. Once again, His Holiness Baha'u'llah reveals the meaning of terms used in the holy books of former religions, such as terms life, death, resurrection, the trumpet blast, paradise, and hell. His Holiness Baha'u'llah states, by the terms life and death spoken of in the scriptures is intended the life of faith and the death of unbelief. The generality of the people, owing to their failure to grasp the meaning of these words, rejected and despised the person of the manifestation, deprived themselves of the light of his divine guidance, and refused to follow the example of that immortal beauty. The day of resurrection, His Holiness Baha'u'llah affirms, is ushered in through the advent of each manifestation of God. By his revelation, the faithful arise from the sepulchres of unbelief and acquire spiritual life. These are some of his words. Such things have come to pass in the days of every manifestation of God. Even as Jesus said, "Ye must be born again." Again he saith, "Except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit." The purport of these words is that whosoever in every dispensation is born of the Spirit and is quickened by the breath of the manifestation of holiness, he verily is of those that have attained unto life and resurrection, and have entered into the paradise of the love of God. And whosoever is not of them is condemned to death and deprivation, to the fire of unbelief, and to the wrath of God. In all the scriptures, the books and chronicles, the sentence of death, of fire, of blindness, of want of understanding, and of hearing have been pronounced against those whose lips have tasted not the ethereal cup of true knowledge, and whose hearts have been deprived of the grace of the Holy Spirit in their day, even as it hath been previously recorded. Hearts have they with which they understand not. In another passage of the Gospel it is written, "And it came to pass that on a certain day that the father of one of the disciples of Jesus had died, that disciple, reporting the death of his father unto Jesus, asked for leave to go and bury him. Whereupon Jesus, that essence of detachment, answered and said, Let the dead bury their dead." In the Quran, There are many references to the day when man will attain to the presence of God. This, His Holiness Baha'u'llah affirms, can only be interpreted as attaining to the presence of the manifestation of God. Attainment unto such presence is possible only in the day of resurrection, which is the day of the rise of God Himself through His all embracing revelation. This is the meaning of the day of resurrection, spoken of in all the scriptures, and announced unto all people. Reflect, can a more precious, a mightier, and more glorious day than this be conceived, so that man should willingly forego its grace and deprive himself of its bounties, which, like unto vernal showers, are raining from the heaven of mercy upon all mankind? Having thus conclusively demonstrated that no day is greater than this day, and no revelation more glorious than this revelation, and having set forth all these weighty and infallible proofs, which no understanding mind can question, and no man of learning overlook, how can man possibly, through the idle contention of the people of doubt and fancy, deprive himself of such a bountiful grace? Have they not heard the well known tradition, when the Qayyam riseth, that day is the day of resurrection? In like manner, the Imams, those unquenchable lights of divine guidance, have interpreted the verse, what can such expect but that God should come down to them overshadowed with clouds? A sign which they have unquestionably regarded as one of the features of the day of resurrection, as referring to Qayyam and his manifestation. There are several references in the second part of the Kitáb-i-Íqán to the divines and religious leaders who, through their so called learning, have hindered the people from turning to the manifestations of God. These statements are similar to those made in the first part of the book, but now are mainly directed to the divines of Islam. For acquired knowledge can become a veil between man and God. Referring to this veil, His Holiness Baha'u'llah states, we have consumed this densest of all veils with the fire of the love of the Beloved. The veil referred to in the saying, the most grievous of all veils is the veil of knowledge. Upon its ashes we have reared the tabernacle of divine knowledge. We have driven from the human heart all else but him who is the desire of the world and glory therein. We cleave to no knowledge but his knowledge, and set our hearts on naught save the effulgent glories of his light. Recognition of the manifestation of God is not dependent upon acquired knowledge. The understanding of his words and the comprehension of the utterances of the birds of heaven are in no wise dependent upon human learning. They depend solely upon purity of heart, chastity of soul, and freedom of spirit. This is evidenced by those who, today, though without a single letter of the accepted standards of learning, are occupying the loftiest seats of knowledge, and the garden of their hearts is adorned through the showers of divine grace with the roses of wisdom and the tulips of understanding. Well is it with the sincere in heart for their share of the light of a mighty day. One of the most illuminating of His Holiness Baha'u'llah's utterances in the Kitáb-i-Íqán is to be found in those passages concerning the qualities and attributes of a true seeker. These are his words as he addresses Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, the uncle of the Bab. But, O my brother, when a true seeker determines to take the step of search in the path leading to the knowledge of the Ancient of Days, he must before all else cleanse and purify his heart, which is the seat of the revelation of the inner mysteries of God, from the obscuring dust of all acquired knowledge, and the illusions of the embodiments of satanic fancy. He must purge his breast, which is the sanctuary of the abiding love of the Beloved, of every defilement, and sanctify his soul from all that pertaineth to water and clay, from all shadowy and ephemeral attachments. He must so cleanse his heart that no remnant of either love or hate may linger therein, lest that love blindly incline him to error, or that hate repel him away from the truth. Even as thou dost witness in this day how most of the people, because of such love and hate, are bereft of the immortal face, have strayed far from the embodiments of the divine mysteries, and shepherdless are roaming through the wilderness of oblivion and error. That seeker must at all times put his trust in God, must renounce the peoples of the earth, detach himself from the world of dust, and cleave unto him who is the Lord of lords. He must never seek to exalt himself above anyone, must wash away from the tablet of his heart every trace of pride and vainglory, and must cling unto patience and resignation, observe silence, and refrain from idle talk. For the tongue is a smouldering fire, and excess of speech a deadly poison. Material fire consumeth the body, whereas the fire of the tongue devoureth both heart and soul. The force of the former lasteth but for a time, whilst the effects of the latter endure a century. That seeker should also regard backbiting as grievous error, and keep himself aloof from its dominion, inasmuch as backbiting quencheth the light of the heart, and extinguisheth the life of the soul. He should be content with little, and be freed from all inordinate desire. He should treasure the companionship of those that have renounced the world, and regard avoidance of boastful and worldly people a precious benefit. At the dawn of every day he should commune with God, and with all his soul persevere in the quest of his beloved. He should consume every wayward thought with the flame of his loving mention, and with the swiftness of lightning pass by all else save him. He should succor the dispossessed, and never withhold his favor from the destitute. He should show kindness to animals, how much more unto his fellow man, to him who is endowed with the power of utterance. He should not hesitate to offer up his life for his beloved, nor allow the censure of the people to turn him away from the truth. He should not wish for others that which he doth not wish for himself, nor promise that which he doth not fulfill. With all his heart should the seeker avoid fellowship with evildoers, and pray for the remission of their sins. He should forgive the sinful, and never despise his low estate, for none knoweth what his own end shall be. How often hath a sinner at the hour of death attained to the essence of faith, and, quaffing the immortal draught, hath taken his flight unto the celestial concourse. And how often a devout believer, at the hour of his soul's ascension, been so changed as to fall into the nethermost fire. Our purpose in revealing these convincing and weighty utterances is to impress upon the seeker that he should regard all else beside God as transient, and count all things save him who is the object of all adoration as utter nothingness. These are among the attributes of the exalted, and constitute the hallmark of the spiritually minded. They have already been mentioned in connection with the requirements of the wayfarers that tread the path of positive knowledge. When the detached wayfarer and sincere seeker have fulfilled these essential conditions, then and only then can he be called a true seeker. Whensoever he hath fulfilled the conditions implied in this verse, whoso maketh efforts for us, he shall enjoy the blessing conferred by the words, in our ways shall we assuredly guide him. Only when the lamp of search, of earnest striving, of longing desire, of passionate devotion, of fervid love, of rapture and ecstasy is kindled within the seeker's heart, and the breeze of his loving kindness is wafted upon his soul, will the darkness of error be dispelled, the mists of doubts and misgivings be dissipated, and the lights of knowledge and certitude envelop his being. At that hour will the mystic herald, bearing the joyful tidings of the Spirit, shine forth from the city of God, resplendent as the morn, and through the trumpet blast of knowledge will awaken the heart, the soul, and the spirit from the slumber of negligence. Then will the manifold favors and outpouring grace of the holy and everlasting Spirit confer such new life upon the seeker that he will find himself endowed with a new eye, a new ear, a new heart, and a new mind. He will contemplate the manifest signs of the universe and will penetrate the hidden mysteries of the soul. Gazing with the eye of God, he will perceive within every atom a door that leadeth him to the stations of absolute certitude. He will discover in all things the mysteries of divine revelation and the evidences of an everlasting manifestation. Having clarified these basic points for Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, His Holiness Baha'u'llah then introduces proofs of the authenticity of the message of the Bab. Once again, he prepares the way by speaking generally about the manifestations of God, devoting several pages to clarify that the greatest proof of a prophet is his own self, just as the proof of the sun is the sun itself. Next in importance as a proof of the manifestation of God is the revelation of the Word of God. His Holiness Baha'u'llah shows how Muhammad, on more than one occasion, pointed to the Qur'an as a proof of his mission. In the beginning of his book he saith, no doubt is there about this book. It is a guidance unto the God-fearing. He, the divine being and unknowable essence, hath himself testified that this book is beyond all doubt and uncertainty, the guide of all mankind until the day of resurrection. In another passage he likewise saith, and if ye be in doubt as to that which we have sent down to our servant, then produce a surah like it, and summon your witness beside God, if ye are men of truth. Behold how lofty is the station, and how consummate the virtue of these verses which he hath declared to be his surest testimony, his infallible proof, the evidence of his all subduing power, and a revelation of the potency of his will. Dear friends, the study of the lives of the founders of all religions demonstrates that the Word of God is the most effective instrument by which the prophet creates a new civilization. It penetrates into the hearts of people and becomes the spirit of the age. When a seeker recognizes the source of the revealed Word, he enters the city of certitude. His Holiness Baha'u'llah affirms, and he describes that city as none other than the Word of God revealed in every age and dispensation. In the days of Moses, it was the Pentateuch. In the days of Jesus, the Gospel. In the days of Muhammad, the Messenger of God, the Qur'an. In this day, the Bayan. And in the dispensation of him whom God will make manifest, his own book, the book unto which all the books of former dispensations must needs be referred, the book which standeth amongst them all transcendent and supreme. Concerning the revelation of the Bab, His Holiness Baha'u'llah writes as follows: such bounty and revelation have been made manifest, that the revealed verses seemed as vernal showers raining from the clouds of the mercy of the All Bountiful. The prophets endowed with constancy, whose loftiness and glory shine as the sun, were each honored with a book which all have seen, and the verses of which have been duly ascertained. Whereas the verses which have rained from this cloud of divine mercy have been so abundant that none hath yet been able to estimate their number. A score of volumes are now available. How many still remain beyond our reach? How many have been plundered and have fallen into the hands of the enemy, the fate of which none knoweth? Because in the beginning of former dispensations certain obscure souls embraced the faith of God, the learned belittled it and scorned it as and scorned its followers. His Holiness Baha'u'llah points out how different was the situation when the Bab appeared. In this most resplendent dispensation, however, this most mighty sovereignty, a number of illumined divines, of men of consummate learning, of doctors of mature wisdom, have attained unto his court, drunk the cup of his divine presence, and been invested with the honor of his most excellent favor. They have renounced, for the sake of the beloved, the world and all that is therein. We will mention the names of some of them, that perchance it may strengthen the faint hearted and encourage the timorous. Among them was Mullah Hussein, who became the recipient of the effulgent glory of the Son of Divine Revelation. But for him, God would not have been established upon the seat of his mercy, nor ascended the throne of eternal glory. Among them also was Sayyid Yahya, which is that unique and peerless figure of his age, known as Wahid, and others well nigh 400 in number, whose names are all inscribed upon the guarded tablet of God. All these were guided by the light of that Son of divine revelation, confessed and acknowledged his truth. Such was their faith that most of them renounced their substance and kindred and cleaved to the good pleasure of the All Glorious. They laid down their lives for their well beloved and surrendered their all in his path. Then following passages of tribute by Baha'u'llah to the Bab, as he describes his steadfastness in proclaiming his cause in the face of bitter opposition. Such steadfastness has characterized all the prophets of God and is yet another of their proofs. These are some of His Holiness Baha'u'llah's statements about the Bab. Another proof and evidence of the truth of this revelation, which amongst all other proofs shineth as the sun, is the constancy of the eternal beauty in proclaiming the faith of God. Though young and tender of age, and though the cause he revealed was contrary to the desire of all the peoples of earth, both high and low, rich and poor, exalted and abased, king and subject, yet he arose and steadfastly proclaimed it. All have known and heard this. He was afraid of no one. He was regardless of consequences. Could such a thing be made manifest except through the power of a divine revelation and the potency of God's invincible will? By the righteousness of God, were anyone to entertain so great a revelation in his heart, the thought of such a declaration would alone confound him. Were the hearts of all men to be crowded into his heart, he would still hesitate to venture upon so awful an enterprise. He could achieve it only by the permission of God, only if the channel of his heart were to be linked with the source of divine grace, and his soul be assured of the unfailing sustenance of the Almighty. Steadfastness in the faith is a sure testimony and a glorious evidence of the truth. And now consider how this Sadra of the Rizwan of God hath, in the prime of youth, risen to proclaim the cause of God. Behold what steadfastness that beauty of God hath revealed. The whole world rose to hinder him, yet it utterly failed. The more severe the persecution they inflicted on that Sadra of blessedness, the more his fervor increased, and the brighter burned the flame of his love. All this is evident, and none disputed its truth. Finally, he surrendered his soul and winged his flight unto the realms above. As to the effect of the revelation of the Bab upon his followers, His Holiness Baha'u'llah writes, and among the evidences of the truth of his manifestation were the ascendancy, the transcendent power and supremacy which he, the revealer of being and manifestation of the adored, hath, unaided and alone, revealed throughout the world. No sooner had that eternal beauty revealed himself in Shiraz in the year 60 and rent asunder the veil of concealment than the signs of the ascendancy, the might, the sovereignty and power emanating from that essence of essences and sea of seas were manifest in every land. So much so that from every city there appeared the signs, the evidences, the tokens, the testimonies of that divine luminary. How many were those pure and kindly hearts which faithfully reflected the light of that eternal sun? And how manifold the emanations of knowledge from that ocean of divine wisdom which encompassed all beings. In every city, all the divines and dignitaries rose to hinder and repress them, and gird up the loins of malice, of envy, and tyranny for their suppression. How great the number of those holy souls, those essences of justice who, accused of tyranny, were put to death, and how many embodiments of purity who showed forth naught but true knowledge and stainless deeds, suffered an agonizing death. Notwithstanding all this, each of these holy beings, up to his last moment, breathed the name of God and soared in the realm of submission and resignation. Such was the potency and transmuting influence which he exercised over them, that they ceased to cherish any desire but his will, and wedded their soul to his remembrance. Dear friends, it is important to realize that the Bab fulfilled prophecies recorded in the scriptures, particularly those of Islam. The revelation of the Bab had a special link with Islam. Not only was he himself descended from Muhammad, but his advent was also most eagerly anticipated by Muslims, both Shia and Sunni, and was considered the climax and the fruit of the faith of Islam. Muhammad and the holy Imams have left behind innumerable prophecies concerning the coming of the Promised One. All the circumstances of his revelation, the time, the place, and many other aspects of his cause are mentioned in the traditions of Islam either explicitly or by allusion. Mirza Ahmad Azqandi, who became an ardent believer, was one of the most outstanding divines of Khorasan. Prior to the declaration of the Bab, he had felt the urge to compile all the prophecies and traditions of Islam connected with the advent of the Promised One. So vast is the scope of these prophecies that his compilation consisted of almost 12,000 traditions. The fulfillment of prophecies concerning the appearance of the Ghayyam is of the utmost importance to Shia Islam. For over 1,000 years, its adherents had discussed these in their mosques, schools, and homes. It is perhaps for this reason that His Holiness Baha'u'llah has devoted a few pages of the Kitáb-i-Íqán to explaining some of these traditions. In doing so, he has demonstrated how the Bab has clearly fulfilled these prophecies. In anticipation of his own revelation, while alluding to himself as the quintessence of truth, the inmost reality, the source of all light, and the King of divine might, His Holiness Baha'u'llah addresses the leaders of the Babi community and their learned men in these words. And now, we beseech the people of the Bayan, all the learned, the sages, the divines, and witnesses amongst them, not to forget the wishes and admonitions revealed in their book. Let them at all times fix their gaze upon the essentials of his cause, lest when he, who is the quintessence of truth, the inmost reality of all things, the source of all light, is made manifest, they cling unto certain passages of the book and inflict upon him that which was inflicted in the dispensation of the Qur'an. For verily powerful is he, the King of divine might, to extinguish with one letter of his wondrous words the breath of life in the whole of the Bayan and the people thereof, and with one letter bestow upon them a new and everlasting life, and cause them to arise and speed out of the sepulchres of their vain and selfish desires. Take heed and be watchful, and remember that all things have their consummation in belief in Him, in attainment unto His day, and in the realization of His divine presence. And in another passage, alluding to Himself as the bird of heaven, he asserts, By God, this bird of heaven, now dwelling upon the dust, can, besides these melodies, utter a myriad songs, and is able, apart from these utterances, to unfold innumerable mysteries. Every single note of its unpronounced utterances is immeasurably exalted above all that have already been revealed, and immensely glorified beyond that which have streamed from this pen. Let the future disclose the hour when the brides of inner meaning will, as decreed by the will of God, hasten forth, unveiled out of their mystic mansions, and manifest themselves in the ancient realm of being. Yet His Holiness Baha'u'llah anticipates in some passages of the Kitáb-i-Íqán the opposition he would meet and the sufferings he would endure at the hands of enemies from within the Babi community. Alluding to Mirza Yahya and those around him, His Holiness Baha'u'llah writes, "In these days, however, such odors of jealousy are diffused, that I swear by the Educator of all beings, visible and invisible, from the beginning of the foundation of the world, though it hath no beginning, until the present day, such malice, envy, and hate have in no wise appeared, nor will they ever be witnessed in the future. For a number of people who have never inhaled the fragrance of justice have raised the standard of sedition and have leagued themselves against us. On every side we witness the menace of their spears, and in all directions we recognize the shafts of their arrows. This although we have never gloried in anything, nor did we seek preference over any soul. To everyone we have been a most kindly companion, a most forbearing and affectionate friend. In the company of the poor we have sought their fellowship, and amidst the exalted and learned we have been submissive and resigned." His Holiness Baha'u'llah refers to his sufferings in many of his writings and makes clear that the greatest suffering inflicted upon the manifestation of God comes from those who profess his faith but are unfaithful to him. The pain which His Holiness Baha'u'llah endured as a result of the unfaithfulness of Mirza Yahya, his insincerity and dishonorable behavior, was not physical. He felt this grief and anguish deep within his soul and states in the Kitáb-i-Íqán, "I swear by God, the one true God, grievous as have been the woes and sufferings which the hand of the enemy and the people of the book inflicted upon us. Yet all these fade into utter nothingness when compared with that which hath befallen us at the hand of those who profess to be our friends." The authority with which His Holiness Baha'u'llah speaks in the Kitáb-i-Íqán, the tone of many of his remarks, and the allusions he makes to himself are all indicative of his divine station and his impending declaration. In one passage he states, "The universe is pregnant with these manifold bounties, awaiting the hour when the effects of its unseen gifts will be made manifest in this world, when the languishing and sore thirst will attain the living Kauthar of their well-beloved, and the erring wanderer, lost in the wilds of remoteness and nothingness, will enter the tabernacle of life and attain reunion with his heart's desire." Dear friends, the Kitáb-i-Íqán is like an ocean. It contains the innermost reality of religion, and its depths are unfathomable. One may read it many times, yet each time new truths and new visions manifest themselves before the eye. Very good, dear friends. Thank you.